for joining us today on the Learn, Dream, Do show. Today we're going to talk about something a little serious. We're going to talk about equality. But what does that mean? The word equality comes from the Latin word equus, which had two meanings. One was level, even, flat, as tall as, on a level with. Equality in mathematics means balanced, or that two things have the same value, and implies that they are the same. The other meaning was kind, just, fair, equitable, impartial. Equality when it comes to people means that they have the same value, even if they're not the same. In the United States, certain groups of people have been valued differently, or sometimes treated even less than human, simply for being who they are. But stick around, because we're going to talk about people who have worked to change that, and ways that we can champion equality too.
We've all seen this symbol before, and we know that it means equal, but where did this sign come from? Robert Recorde is credited with being the inventor of the equal sign. Recorde was a royal court physician for England's King Edward VI and Queen Mary. He lived from 1510 to 1558 and first proposed the equal sign in 1557, saying instead of repeating the phrase "is equal to" over and over again, he would just use a pair of parallels. He wrote in his manuscript, "Because no two things can be more equal."
Who was Sojourner Truth? Well, she was a champion for equality in the 1800s. She was born in Ulster County, New York around 1797 and died in 1883. She grew up to be a fiery abolitionist speaker and feminist who campaigned for justice. When she was in her 20s, she escaped from the farm in upstate New York where she was being kept as a slave with her infant daughter, and then after slavery was abolished in New York State, sued her former master for illegally selling her 5-year-old son in 1826. She won the case, saved her child, and never stopped speaking up. Her birth name was Isabella Baumfree, and she spoke Dutch until she was 9. In 1827, she experienced a religious conversion and changed her name to Sojourner, which means traveler, and Truth because she felt called to speak her truth and fight for justice and an end to slavery. She was an incredible and charismatic speaker and singer. She would rework song lyrics to convey the message she needed and was famous for her off-the-cuff speeches. She spoke to all types of audiences, from neighbors to President Lincoln himself. Her words helped the Union recruit black soldiers to fight in the Civil War, and she continued to use her skills to recruit allies in the fight for a better, more equal future for women and African Americans all throughout her life. Sojourner Truth was brilliant for many reasons. She was one of the first people to harness the new technology of photographs to help tell her story. She sold cartes de visite, or small photographs attached to cards. They were inexpensive and accessible, and therefore very successful. She put "I sell the shadow to support the substance" on all her cartes de visite. She sold the cards to fund her speaking tours where she spoke about equality. She was such a powerful storyteller that even though she could neither read nor write, her photos, speeches, and songs were more than enough to carry her ideas and change the hearts and minds of her listeners. One of the most famous quotes attributed to her is, "Ain't I a woman?" However, the historical accuracy of this quote is disputed because the source that reported that line was written by someone else, Frances Gage, and was written in a dialect that she did not speak 12 years after the speech was actually given in Akron, Ohio. Several of the newspapers at the time wrote pieces about the speech itself, and since those sources were written immediately after the speech was delivered for public consumption, these sources are more trusted. A more accurate quote from her is, "Truth is powerful and will prevail." She spoke her truth as she was named, and we inherited a better world from her. Thank you, Sojourner Truth.
Another champion of equality, Audre Lorde, had this to say about differences. Too often, we pour the energy needed for recognizing and exploring difference into pretending those differences are insurmountable barriers or that they do not exist at all. This results in a voluntary isolation or false and treacherous connections. Either way, we do not develop tools for using human difference as a springboard for creative change within our lives. Audre Lorde, Sister Outsider, 1970.
A long time ago, in 1979, there was a female pioneer so monumental that the United States Mint made a coin after her. This woman is Susan B. Anthony. Let's have an interview with a coin that is made in her honor.
Hello, welcome to my humble home. It's a coin jar. I live in a coin jar because I am a coin. A very special dollar coin. The profile that you see on my front is based off of Susan B. Anthony. Now, what did Susan B. Anthony do that was so important that they made a coin in her honor?
Well, she spoke out for equal rights and gave a lot of speeches. She was an early leader of the women's suffrage movement. Susan B., you're so strong, you stand up for your rights. Susan B., you're so brave, the freedom flag you wave.
And freedom flag did she wave. Susan B. Anthony was the president of the National Women's Suffrage Association. In this photo, you can see women on the streets dressed in white. To this day, white outfits represent sisterhood and solidarity. But her work wasn't all speeches and white clothes. During the election of 1872, Susan B. Anthony defied the authorities and stood up for her rights. She voted in Rochester, New York, and got arrested. This example of civil disobedience brought national attention to the issue. Her work helped pave way for the 19th Amendment of the Constitution, which passed on August 18, 1920. That amendment gave women the right to vote. Unfortunately, Susan B. Anthony died 14 years earlier at the age of 86. To this day, many people of all backgrounds come and visit Susan's grave in Rochester, New York on Election Day. Thank you, Susan B. Anthony. I am honored to be a coin in your image.
I believe we are here on the planet Earth to live, grow up, and do what we can to make this world a better place for all people to enjoy freedom. Rosa Parks.
People used to think that African Americans were not human because their skin was darker. So black people were treated extremely different. Black people couldn't eat in certain restaurants. They weren't allowed to shop in many stores. We couldn't buy a house in certain neighborhoods. We couldn't go to school. We didn't have the right to vote. And we didn't have the right to own and be rewarded for our cool and bright ideas. There are so many people who fought for hundreds of years to change laws so that black people could be treated fairly, and one of those was Michael King. Michael was born on January 15, 1929, and he lived with his mom, his dad, his big sister, and his little brother. His dad was an important preacher, and he often traveled the world to learn more about Christianity. One time, after he visited Germany, he learned about Martin Luther, and he loved him so much that he went home and changed his name to Martin Luther King Sr. and changed Michael's name to Martin Luther King Jr. Martin was already 5 years old when his dad changed his name. MLK led the civil rights movement for all African Americans and minorities and holds many accomplishments. He wrote and delivered numerous speeches, he met with presidents, and he led many peaceful desegregation campaigns in the forms of marches and sit-ins at all white establishments. In 1963, MLK stood in front of 250,000 people at a peaceful rally in Washington, D.C. and delivered his most famous speech, I Have a Dream. People of all cultures came together to demand jobs, voting rights, and freedom of racial oppression for African Americans. It was the biggest rally anyone had ever seen. Throughout this time, MLK was arrested over 29 times. He was often hit, kicked, punched, and badly injured by people who did not want whites and blacks to be in the same places like restaurants and schools with each other. Although all these bad things happened to Martin Luther King Jr., he still strived to achieve civil rights for African Americans without the use of any violence. Martin Luther King's peaceful efforts led him to receive the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964 and land on the cover of Time magazine again, this time as Man of the Year. 1964 was a big year for MLK and all other Americans. This was also the year that the Civil Rights Act was passed. The Civil Rights Act said that people could not be treated differently based on their skin color, religion, gender, or because of where they come from. It also said that everyone had the right to go in all public places, and it allowed kids of all colors to go to school together. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. spent much of his 39 years of life laboring to change the course of the United States and create equality for all Americans. And today, we celebrate his efforts by honoring him every January for his birthday. MLK is considered to be the greatest human rights advocate in the history of the United States. And this makes Martin Luther King Jr. a champion of equality.
Did you know that the quote, "Be the change you wish to see in the world," is actually a misquote from Mahatma Gandhi? The actual quote is,
"We but mirror the world. All the tendencies present in the outer world are to be found in the world of our body. If we could change ourselves, the tendencies in the world would also change. As one changes their own nature, so does the attitude of the world change towards them. A wonderful thing it is, and the source of our happiness. We need not wait to see what others do." Mahatma Gandhi.
Mahatma Gandhi definitely practiced what he preached. He practiced civil disobedience and nonviolence. His legacy of pushing for civil rights later inspired other leaders such as Nelson Mandela and Martin Luther King Jr.
In the early days of the United States, our government made treaties with Native American nations just like they would any other government. In 1871, our country began taking those rights away, making decisions that directly affected Native Americans without their consent. Throughout the 19th and 20th centuries, the government broke treaties that had been made with Native American nations and divided up their land so that they could sell it to white people. Partly inspired by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the Civil Rights Movement, Native American activists in the 1960s and 70s fought to get the United States to view them as equal people, to honor their treaties, and allow Native American tribes the right to govern themselves. There was no single leader in this movement, but Vine Deloria Jr. was one of its most inspirational. Vine Deloria Jr. was a member of the Standing Rock Sioux tribe. He was an author of more than 20 books, a lawyer, theologian, historian, professor, community organizer, and activist. He often testified before the U.S. Congress and Supreme Court to ask the government to honor its treaties and pushed for tribal governments to have the power to make their own decisions. Deloria was elected director of the National Congress of American Indians, where he was a great leader for 3 years. He was a board member of the National Museum of the American Indian, which is now part of the Smithsonian, where he fought against portrayals of Native Americans that were stereotyped or cartoonish. Native Americans are still fighting for land rights and for the removal of stereotyped and harmful images in our culture. If Vine Deloria Jr. were around today, I think he'd say there's more work to be done to give Native Americans an equal standing in the United States.
John Echohawk, a lawyer and member of the Pawnee tribe and a political advocate for the rights of Native Americans, said this: "Inspired by Dr. King, who was advancing the civil rights agenda under equality, we thought that we could use the law to advance our Indianship. We believed that we could fight for a policy of self-determination that was consistent with U.S. law, and that we could govern our own affairs, our own ways, and continue to survive in this society."
Imagine equal opportunity for children around the world. Good food, clean water, education too. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will be as one.
used to think that being gay was a sickness. Did you know that until 2020, it was legal for companies to fire people just for being gay? Many people in the LGBT community would keep who they were a secret because they feared they might lose their job, their friends, their family, or even worse. Thankfully, many people have fought for equal rights for the LGBT community. Some consider the activist Barbara Gittings to be the mother of the LGBT civil rights movement. In 1958, she started the New York chapter of the Daughters of Bilitis, which was the first lesbian civil and political rights organization in the United States. She and others helped enlist activists from New York, Washington, D.C., and Philadelphia for the first public demonstration for gay and lesbian equality. In 1970, she marched to commemorate the first anniversary of Stonewall, which today we know as the first New York City Pride Parade. In 1973, Gittings convinced the American Psychiatric Association to stop categorizing being gay as a sickness. She also successfully campaigned to promote books that tell realistic stories of gay people and eliminate discrimination in the nation's libraries. After volunteering for the American Library Association for 16 years, she was awarded a lifetime membership. Things have come a long way thanks to people like Barbara Gittings, but there's still a lot more work to be done to help protect equality for the LGBT community.
Archbishop Desmond Tutu was awarded a Nobel Peace Prize for his work fighting apartheid in his home country of South Africa. This quote is from an introduction he wrote to a book called Forgiveness and Reconciliation. "We are made for goodness. We are made for love. We are made for friendliness. We are made for togetherness. We are made for all of the beautiful things that you and I know. We are made to tell the world that there are no outsiders. All are welcome. We are meant all to belong to this family, this human family."
I got a chance to talk with someone who works hard every day to build a culture where all kids and families can thrive. We talked about equity and equality. She gave me some great advice about bullying, and overall just lots of things that we can all do to celebrate diversity and make the world a more inclusive place. Let's hear what she has to say.
Hi, how are you doing? My name is Christina Brooks, and I am your Chief Equity Officer for the City of Fort Worth. Equity means that we want to make sure that everybody has a fair shot at doing whatever they want to do, that people everywhere, all over the city, can live the best life that they possibly can and have access to all the great things that the city has to offer.
What are some ways that kids can promote equality?
Yeah, so think about things from different perspectives. So we all come to the table with our own experiences and the way that we do things in our house that may be completely different from the way that others do things in their homes. Opening yourself up to be able to learn from people that do things differently or speak different languages at home or prepare different types of foods, and being able to ask questions so that you can learn more about the world around you and the community that's around you.
That's a great point. I like the idea of just being curious about it, looking around and wondering and asking questions.
Yes.
Okay, let's pretend that I'm back in elementary school and I might see someone who's getting picked on or getting treated unfairly. Are there things that I can do even if I'm just a kid myself?
Yeah, I think the important thing to do is to step in and to speak up when you see something that is going wrong and it's hurtful to someone. And understand that the best way to try to understand when you see bullying take place is that hurt people hurt people. There may have been something that happened to them that they're still hurting over, and they're acting out on that hurt in a way that's kind of continuing the cycle of hurt. And if you want to break that cycle, then it's important for you to kind of step up and say, it's not okay for you to be mean or to say mean things to someone else. And sometimes it helps if there's a follow-up discussion where you pull that person off to the side, the bully off to the side with an adult, and you help them kind of talk through what they're actually angry about. Because sometimes it's not even about what is happening in the moment. Sometimes it may be something that happened before they left the house, or it could be something that happened weeks ago. There have been so many things that have happened in this past year that have been really hurtful. And I think that it's really important for us as individuals, as communities, as a city, to come together and really just begin to care about each other again, and not just in word, but also in deed. Doing nice things for people, saying, giving people compliments, and focusing in on what people are doing that's good.
Christina, do you have any other advice or words of inspiration for the children watching at home?
Oh gosh, that children can teach just as much as their parents can teach. And so I am so grateful that my children teach me how to be a better person, how to be a better mom every day, just by the conversations that we have together, and them giving me the opportunity to see the world through their eyes, which can be very different from what I see and the experiences that I've had. And so they're always, their perspective is always fresh and new, and sometimes very innocent. And so I am always grateful for those lessons that they teach me every day.
That is so beautiful. I love the idea that children can be teachers too. That's something I've definitely experienced myself. And you have 5
Yes.
children, right? So that's a lot of teachers.
I have a lot of lessons.
You're always
all
learning.
5 of my children, 3 girls and 2 boys, and all of them have taught me so much every day, from the time that they were moving around in my belly to now our oldest daughter is a teacher herself, and she teaches 4th graders in Chicago. So it's never there's never a stopping point. There's always like a continuous learning curve, and so there's always opportunities to learn more.
Definitely. Well, remember that, kids at home, that you can be a teacher too, and you have a lot of things that you see that maybe we don't see. So make sure that you're teaching the grown-ups that are around you. Christina Brooks, thank you so much for being our Chief Equity Officer for Fort Worth, and thank you for joining us for this interview today.
You are welcome. Thank you so much. Have a great day, everybody.
Get up, stand up. Stand up for your right. Get up, stand up. Don't give up the fight. Get up, stand up. Stand up for your right. Get up, stand up. Stand up for what's right.
Try this.
We've talked a lot today about famous people, but I'd also like us to take some time to think about the things that make us unique. To celebrate what makes you, you, we're going to make self-portraits today. We're going to do some coffee painting. Now, for this activity, you'll need a printed photograph, blank computer paper, a pencil, a window, some sunlight, a paintbrush, and some cold coffee or tea.
We'll get started at the window. You'll need your blank paper, your photo, and a pencil. Go up to the window and hold up your photo so that it's backlit, and then take your paper and put it on top. Now we're going to just sketch the outline of your face. You can go real gently, and sketching means the lines don't need to be perfect, because remember, we're going back over this with coffee later. I'm going over the most basic details of my face, and I'll fill the shadows in later with the coffee paint. Now that we're done with our sketch, let's go to the table. We'll need a paintbrush and our coffee. And then we're going to start filling in those shadows just like we talked about. Now, the really cool thing about using coffee as paint is that it works a lot like watercolor, so we can layer this. And what I mean by that is you can go over everything once in the coffee, and then once it dries, you can go over it again, so you can add more shades and values of contrast in there. Now, don't forget, you're going to need to leave some parts of it bright so that the details, when you bring them in and make them darker, really pop. Okay, great. Now that we've done our first layer, it's time to hang it up in the window and let it dry. One of the other things you can do is you can go over it in coffee and then add some details in pencil or pen when you're done to really bring those forward. All done! Great job, everyone! Happy painting!
To learn more about equality, check out these books. The book Equal Schmequal by Virginia Roll discusses how animal friends want to play a game of tug-of-war but can't quite figure out how to make their teams equal. Check out this book on Overdrive to discover how Mouse and her friends create equal teams. The book If You Go With Your Goat to Vote by Jan Salzmer teaches young readers what to expect on Election Day when they grow up. This book intends to inspire kids to vote as well as inspire grown-ups to be model voters. This book can also be found on Overdrive. Our littlest readers can learn about equality too while reading the book The ABCs of Equality by Janelle Ewing. This book introduces complicated concepts to young children, from celebrating our differences, understanding everyone's beliefs, and treating everyone with kindness. This title can be picked up at Curbside. Check out biographies on champions of equality, like the book American Indian Rights Movement, Movements That Matter by Eric Braun, and find out how important people like Sacheen Littlefeather and Russell Means paved the way for current activists. Did you know Hispanic Americans were also denied the chance to go to certain schools because of the color of their skin? Pick up the award-winning book Separate is Never Equal by Duncan Tonatia and learn how Sylvia Mendez fought for desegregation at school when she was just 8 years old. If you're a reader that loves sports, then you would love the book I Am Billie Jean King by Brad Meltzer. This book is a biography of a tennis star's activism for equality in tennis and other sports. And last, it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. He's everyone's favorite neighbor. It's Mr. Rogers. Mr. Rogers. The book, You Are My Friend, discusses the childhood of Mr. Rogers and how his struggles with making friends helped him to become a champion of kindness and equality and spread messages of compassion through television. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Equality. We'll see you next time.